Hello and welcome to EPhi Chats. My name is Micah Moore and I am a member of Iota Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated Epsilon Phi chapter. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and all month our chapter has been sharing lots of information from stats and facts so that we can make sure that the community is aware of such a very important issue. We wanted to continue the conversation, and before we close out Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I'm excited to have a special guest with us, Miss Nakia Hanson. Miss Nakia Hanson is extremely knowledgeable and she's an expert when it comes to domestic violence and working with college students and young adults who experience domestic violence, stalking, and other forms of violence. I'm so very excited and honored to have this opportunity to talk with her. We just really want to raise awareness and we want to end the silence and we want to stop the violence. So let's welcome Miss Nakia Hanson.
Good evening.
Good evening, Miss Hanson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we get started, I want the listeners to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to share some information about Miss Hanson. So Miss Hanson currently is working at Prairie View A&M University as a program manager of the Relationship and Sexual Violence program. Nakia is also a certified trauma sexual recovery coach, and she has her own private practice. And this month is Women's Small Business Month, so she does have her own private practice. Kudos to you. We are definitely shouting out our small business owners. Yes. And she is certified through the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. Nakia is a survivor of sexual assault and also cancer. She knows firsthand how hard it is to seek help and to start the healing process. She once suffered from the strong Black woman syndrome. Once she did not seek help. And when she did seek help, it was the best decision that she made in her entire life. She specializes in working with college and young adult female survivors who have experienced sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, rape, dating, violence, and also cancer. Nakia knows that her purpose in life is to advocate and to fight for the rights of survivors. Ms. Hanson provides trauma recovering coaching services in her private practice to all female survivors of child sexual abuse, rape, dating, domestic violence, and cancer. Nakia is passionate about changing the narrative of survivors of color, especially those that suffer from the strong Black woman syndrome, and those survivors that are suffering in silence based on family traditions. Nakia is currently accepting new clients, and potential clients may book on her website. And so we're going to give a little bit more information towards the end on how you can reach Nakia for her services and just to learn more. So once again, thank you so much, Nakia, for joining us. I've had the pleasure of working with you, and I know when we talk about such a very important topic and often sensitive topic, I just knew that you would be the right person to give the community some more information and to help us once again break that silence and stop the violence. So thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let us jump right into it. So first, what is domestic violence, right? So this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and so we just want to know a little bit more about domestic violence, and what is it that you want the listeners to know about the importance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month?
Okay. Um, so domestic violence is any behavior with the purpose of gaining and maintaining power and control over your particular partner. So that can be your spouse, somebody that you're living with, or you have lived with that person. Domestic violence can include common law situations, marital situations, family members. So that's the difference between domestic violence and dating violence. Dating violence is you are just strictly dating that person, but domestic violence is more so, I just think of it if you are sharing a home, that's domestic violence. And so it's any tactic that abusers can use to gain and maintain power and control over their particular partner. And so Domestic Violence Awareness Month is so important because it gives us advocates and people that are passionate about domestic violence to about what's going on, how to help a survivor that is in that situation. But we also have to remember those that have lost their lives due to domestic violence as well. And so we mourn those victims, but we also remember them. And so that can involve women, men, children, bystanders, girlfriends and boyfriends of someone that was once a victim. That just gives us the opportunity to educate people and how to help someone that may be in that situation.
Mhm. Absolutely. And thank you so much for explaining that. Because, what I hear you saying is that domestic violence, it impacts all of us
Mm-hmm.
in some form, shape, or fashion. And so it's important for us to be informed and be educated, because, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. Anyone
No, it
can
doesn't.
be affected, right? And then also to, remember those that, have unfortunately lost their lives due to domestic violence.
Right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the stats, because when it comes to the statistics, domestic violence affects millions of people. And so I'm not really sure, if people are, aware of how many people are affected, but we're talking 10 plus million people in a year. And so this is, not just women, but also men. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. So do you have any statistics that you can share with us, especially from Texas? And then just kind of your feedback on what those statistics, tell us.
Okay. So 1 in 4 women are affected by domestic violence, and 1 in 7 men are affected by domestic violence as well. And so in the state of Texas, they do a statistics every year. So they just came out with the 2019 statistics in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So 150 women were killed by their intimate partner, whether they've been husband or boyfriend. And then 30 men were murdered by their female partner. And I believe one woman was killed by a same sex partner in the
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ community, and 3 men were killed by their same sex partner.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the statistics in Texas, and they do it every single year. And they also do a narrative of what happened in those particular situations as well, based on the county. And Harris County has been #1 for the past 5 years
Oh,
of the
wow.
most murders dealing with domestic violence.
Wow.
And so what that tells us is that we have a lot more work to do. We have
Mm-hmm.
a lot more work to do in the Houston area, because you see it on the news. I know I see it on the news at least once a week,
Mm-hmm.
um, if not more. And so it was just one that happened last week, as a matter of fact. But we just have a lot of work to do. And,
Yeah.
people are not talking about it, especially in our community. When I talked about in my bio family traditions, my clients, they were taught that they just don't talk about those things. What happens in this house stays in this house.
Yeah.
Or we're going to go to church and we're going to talk to our pastor. Well, that's all fine and good, but you got to get some other help as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we got to get our mind right. We get our spiritual thing right, but we got to get our mind right as well, and make sure that our survivors that are in that situation have a safety plan. You got to have a safety plan because the most dangerous time is when somebody is trying to leave an abusive relationship or they have
Mhm.
left a relationship. That's
Mhm.
usually when a murder will occur. So safety plans are just so important. And so that's part of the education part of Domestic Violence Awareness Month as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And those statistics are very alarming. And I definitely agree that we have a lot of work to do. And there's so much stigma and shame in the Black and Brown community, which makes it very difficult for us to reach out and get the help that we need,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just like you said, like we don't want to talk about it. What happens in this house stays in this house. And it's so much shame if we do, speak out. And so it's unfortunate because we can't get the help, that we need for, fear of feeling judged, and everything else that comes along with that.
Right.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. So we have been and still are in a pandemic since March, and a lot of that we have spent, time in quarantine. Have you noticed that the domestic violence cases have gone up since we've been in quarantine and we're stuck in the house with each other and our significant others?
Yes, it has tripled.
Wow.
Um, Houston Area Women's Center has talked about how their calls have tripled and how they're full in their shelter, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Family Time, and Humble. I mean, all of the nonprofits that work with survivors of domestic violence, all of their calls have increased simply because
Mm.
we are in the home
Yeah.
with the abuser. And if she or he is allowed to work, they might have lost their job, so they're depending on their abuser, and their abuser is using that to their advantage,
Mm.
to hold them hostage in the home where they can't get out anyway. When we were able to get out,
Yeah.
they can't leave the house. It's just been so many situations um, and calls where people are in dangerous situations because of the pandemic. So yes,
Mhm.
the calls have increased.
Yeah, and I hear you saying it's making it harder.
Yes. Very
Yeah.
much so. So they had to get a lot of the survivors were getting really creative.
Hmm.
So I saw a video one time where this girl, the only way she could get out of the house is they shared a dog, and she pretended that the dog was sick, and so
Hmm.
the they had took the guy, her abuser, back in the room, and she acted like she had to go to the restroom. But what she was doing is writing a note saying, my husband is keeping me hostage, help. And so when she walked back out, because he was coming out of the room like, what is taking you so long? And she
Hmm.
just handed it to the vet tech, and they were able to call the police. And when they arrested him, she just burst into tears because she was like, my boyfriend, or I don't remember if it was her boyfriend or husband, but he was holding me hostage.
Mm.
So it's been several situations like that, where they are able to get out the house, but then they're crying for help from somebody to call the police and get me out of this situation. So it's just not easy to leave an abusive
No.
relationship. And so I want the listeners to know that just do, if you know somebody, a family member or a friend, please don't tell them just to leave. Just
Hmm.
leave them or just leave her or whatever. Don't do that. They have to have a safety plan because it's just so dangerous,
Hmm.
to walk out the door. It's just not that easy, like we would in a regular relationship, a healthy
Hmm.
relationship. If it's not good, we can just walk out the door and be like, okay, bye. But it's
Hmm.
not like that in an abusive relationship. So we have to have conversation with those that are in an abusive relationship and want to leave. They just sometimes don't have the means to.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And I think that brings up a great point because, a lot of times it's easier said than done, right? When you're not in that situation, you can be quick to say, oh, well, if that was me, I would just leave. Well, why don't they just leave? Well, why are they staying? And so, talk to us a little bit more about why people do stay in domestic violence situations, because like you said, it is not easy, and we really need, people to understand that it's just not that simple.
Right. So there are so many different ways why someone would stay in an abusive relationship, but the number one reason is um, when a domestic violence situation starts, the abuser is isolating you from your family and your friends. And they're doing that because if you decide to leave, where are you going to go? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're not talking to your friends anymore because you can't. And you're not talking to your family anymore because you're not allowed to. So they do that so if you try to leave, you won't have anywhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the family, depending on the friends, you don't have anywhere to go. And so you feel like I don't have anywhere to go, so I'm just gonna stay. Sometimes people stay for the children. Sometimes people stay because they don't have the economic means to be out on their own. They depend solely on their abuser because they're not working, or if they're working, they're not able to pay all of their bills. And so that that's some of the reasons why someone would stay, or that person has threatened their life, so if you leave, I'm gonna kill you, or if you leave, I'm gonna kill the kids. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people think that an abuser will only kill their stepkids. That's not true. They'll kill their own kids in front of the mom just to get their point across. So you just don't know what is being said behind closed doors. And a lot of times, people don't believe that this person can be an abuser because the person that's outside of the door is charming and
Mm-hmm.
funny and has just a great personality. So you would just never think that this person is that person behind closed doors. So
Mm-hmm.
he or she is not going to be who they are behind closed doors. They're going to be
Right.
this perfect person, and this
Right.
person is not going to show that abusive behavior simply because if she or he was to go to that person and say, "Hey, he abusing me or she abusing me," they're gonna be like, "Oh no, I, never. I just can't
Mm-hmm.
picture that person doing that." And they do that. I used to work with abusers in the battered intervention program, prevention program, and we would talk about their tactics and how they would do things, and that's what they would do. They're very charming people, even the women,
Mm-hmm.
very charming, and you just wouldn't think that they would do anything like that, and they do that on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I think what really stands out and what I hear is that, safety.
Yes,
Safety
that
is.
safety plan is so important. And when I'm talking about a safety plan, I'm talking about who can the survivor call if they were in trouble and they left the home. Who could they call on the phone really quickly for that person to come, and also for that
Yeah.
person to call the police? And I wouldn't recommend that they call somebody that they are mutual friends with their husband or their boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know if they will call the abuser and say, "Hey, she's trying to leave or he's trying to leave." It has
Right.
to be somebody outside of the relationship, mutual friends and things like that. Having the paperwork together. So your social security card, your birth certificate, if you have kids, their social security card, their birth certificate, and have it in a place where he wouldn't look or she wouldn't look and be like, okay, what is this? And so a person can have up to like 9, 10 safety plans depending on their
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yeah.
So just when that moment that he goes to work or she goes to work and you can leave, even if there's a tracker on your phone. I mean, we've helped people get on buses, the $5 bus, or to escape their abusers several times, even when they, excuse me, even when they have a tracker on their phone. There is a way
Mm-hmm.
to do it. But that safety plan is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that sounds essential so that they can be, prepared and to identify those resources, and
Right.
individuals and places, that they would be able to go, when they're ready and able to
Hmm.
leave, to
And
be
even if they don't
prepared.
have, I'm sorry, even if they don't have a friend, they can call the Houston Area Women's Center hotline, and they can list, that they memorize the number, that they don't have it just laying out, because
Mhm.
that could cause a safety situation with their abuser. But they can call that hotline. It's 24 hours, and they will send somebody to come and get the person.
Mm. Okay. That's good information to know. And so, one thing I do want to talk about that you mentioned, as far as, abusers and victims, a lot of times I think when people hear about domestic violence, they automatically assume that the victim is the female and that the abuser is the male. And so, I want to kind of break
Talk
some
about
myths and
it.
shed some truth and some light to that. So from your experience, is that always the case?
Well, it's underreported because of the
Mhm.
stigma behind men being abused by women. Because, it's
Mhm.
like, well, what? You need to man up. Like, why are you letting her hit you or talk to you in an abusive way? So it's the stigma behind it is underreported, but it does happen.
Okay.
Women are starting to get arrested for dating domestic violence, depending on the laws of the state.
Mhm.
And like I said, 30 men were killed um, by their female partner in the state of Texas. And even though the number is not high as women,
Mhm.
they're starting to come out a little bit more.
Okay.
I'm working with one right now as my client, and it took him a while to come forward because he just doesn't want anybody to know that his wife
Mhm.
hits him, and he just wasn't raised that way to hit her back.
Right.
And so he just takes it and he just leaves the house. But to say that it's not happening, it is happening. We have a lot of women that have grown up in those situations, and we sometimes the myth is that people that are abusers, they can't control their anger, but anger
Mhm.
has nothing to do with dating domestic violence. It has nothing to do with someone losing their temper and then whatever. Being manipulative and trying to control your partner has nothing to do with anger. So that is a myth I definitely want to
Mhm.
X out, because I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, they can't control their anger or they can't control their temper. It has nothing to do with that. It's a learned behavior. Somebody saw it in the home. They saw an uncle or a cousin or a father or a grandfather do
Mhm.
something, and nobody sent that child to counseling to say, hey, that's not how you're supposed to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And I call children the silent survivors, because children are
Mhm.
witnessing the abuse, and children also are witnessing the murder of their mother or their father. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of trauma in children, and they never get the help that they need, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Mhm. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, oftentimes we forget about the kids
Yes.
in the situation. And like you said, they're silent survivors, right? Because they're witnessing, everything firsthand. And then depending upon, how old they are, it can be extremely hard to comprehend. And not only that, there's trauma attached to
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
as they get older. And that's something that, they do have to live with and that they struggle with. And so, we can't forget about the children, that are involved in seeing all of this and witnessing it and the impact that it's having on them.
Right. And it does have an impact.
Mhm.
People think that just because they're children they're not going to remember or they're not going to understand. They do. They do a lot of play therapy with children at the nonprofits and even outside of the nonprofits in private practice. And they will draw pictures of their dad over their mom with a knife or a
Mhm.
gun. They see that stuff, and they recognize it. They don't know how to communicate it, but
Right.
they know. They don't know how to communicate their feelings necessarily, or
Mhm.
just anything else, but they know what's going on. So don't
Mhm.
think they don't know, because they do.
Absolutely. Kids are so, so smart. And sometimes more is caught than taught.
That's
Right.
right.
So they're seeing everything and they're taking it all in. Absolutely. So I want to ask you, what are some signs of domestic violence? Like, what should we, be on the lookout for if we're not, in a healthy relationship, like a healthy relationship versus a not so healthy relationship? So what are some of the signs?
Well, domestic violence and dating violence, it starts off really small.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do something really small just to see if you are going to go out the door, if you're going to leave, or if you're going to give them all of these chances. So it start off with something really small, and it could be sometimes it start off real big. It just depends on the situation, but that's just, most of the time it starts out really small. So if that person just kind of, you know, do you like that? And just to see what you're going to do, or say something really disrespectful to
Mm-hmm.
you to see what you're going to do, like what you're going to accept. And then it escalates from there. It could be a conversation like, oh, I'm going out with my girlfriends tonight. And then they're like, well, I thought you was going to stay with me. Like, why you got to go out with your girlfriends? So you just went out with your girlfriends last weekend. I thought it was going to be my weekend. Well, if you're in a healthy relationship, he or
Yeah.
she is not going to care if you go out with your girlfriends, if y'all
Mm-hmm.
don't have any plans. So it's just little things that starts to happen, and you ignore it because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, okay, well, he wants to spend time with me, or, he cares about me, or she cares about me. She just wants to spend time with me, not really recognizing that that's a way of him or her gaining and maintaining that control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's just those little things that, and we get that we God has given us that, that feeling like something is not right. Mm, go with that gut feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because listen to that. That's there
Yeah.
for a reason, because something is just not right. And I think what we do is, if we have shared trauma,
Mm-hmm.
we think that that's a good thing. So if I got daddy issues and you got daddy issues, that we're just going to be like, or if I witnessed abuse in my home and you did too, that we're
Mm-hmm.
going to come together and we're just going to be great. And that
Yeah.
is not true. So especially if neither one of you have received help, but it's just the small little things, and we tend to ignore those small little things, and those things escalate, and they get
Mm-hmm.
bigger and they get bigger and they get bigger. And so, yeah, sometimes it starts off physical, sometimes it starts off emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's just those little things, and you got to recognize those red flags.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely like how you pointed out that it's not always physical.
No.
Not always physical. It
Mm-mm.
can be mentally, emotionally, the control, right? Trying to dictate what you do, what you don't do, where you can go,
And what you
verbal
wear.
abuse, where,
Mm-hmm.
right? Verbal abuse. So it's not always physical. There's so
Right.
many different aspects of domestic violence that come into play. And like you said, it doesn't always start off really, really big. It could be really subtle, and it could be
Mm-hmm.
small to the point that you just don't, think anything of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, like you said, just almost like I hear you saying, like testing
Yep.
those boundaries and those
Mm-hmm.
limits to see like how far, they can go.
And when I used
Mhm.
to do the facilitation for the Battery Intervention Prevention Program, all of them stated, like, that's what I do. I see what I can get away with. So if she or he lets me get away with this, then I'm going to try this. And then I'm
Mm,
going to try that. And then I'm going to push her a little bit harder, because I used to work with the men. So I'm going to push her, and I'm going to see what she does. And then the next
mm,
time, I'm going to push her really hard and see what she does. And then if she doesn't ever do anything, then I know that I can just get away with whatever.
mm, hmm.
So it was
Wow.
I couldn't do it anymore because they used to just piss me off.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting. I just kind of wanted to see the other side. And it's good to have that information for my
Hmm.
practice when I'm working with clients, because I'm able to educate them so they won't get into another relationship that's abusive.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. That's good information. So I wanna also talk about how do we how do we support individuals, right? Because we said domestic violence does not discriminate. And I truly, believe, like you said, 1 in 4, 1 in 7, we may personally know of people that have been in a domestic violence, situation. And so how do we help and support those that we love and those that we care about, right? But also, trying to be as understanding as possible, trying to be gentle, like you mentioned earlier, not to just tell somebody just to leave, because it's not that simple. So what can we do to support and be there for our loved ones?
Sure. One of the things is a lot of survivors, they don't want to be judged if they go back to the
Mm-hmm.
relationship or if they decide to stay. They don't want your judgment. They just really want your support in a listening ear. And sometimes you are the only person that they trust to disclose that information. And so when they do disclose, it's like, okay, what do you want me to do? Like, how can I support you? And they'll tell you. They won't have a problem telling you. And so you just sometimes just need to be that listening ear and not say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just be that listening ear and let them know that the situation that they are in is abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they shouldn't be treated that way. And I mean, you can go through the whole, and they're listening to you, and they know that the situation that they're in is not right. They just don't want to leave, or they don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to leave. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be that person, just know that you need to call the police if she or he decides to leave the relationship. Go ahead and call the police, because you don't want to put yourself in a dangerous situation, because bystanders are killed too. So
Mm-hmm.
sure that if she or he is ready, that you go ahead and call the police, so they can be involved, so it won't be any type of situations. But just being that listening ear with no judgment is the most important thing. Sometimes you don't even need to say anything, but if you are going to say something, you just need to ask, okay, how can I support you? What
Mm-hmm.
do you need from me? Instead of, oh girl, you just need to leave. I don't even know why you staying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you, get out? Like, I'll help you get out. No, you won't. Like, they
Yeah.
don't need that. You need to provide them with resources,
It's
and
good.
get them to memorize the number. I even talked about safety plans on here a little bit. Even if they don't want to go and talk to somebody at the Houston Area Women's Center or somebody like myself, then y'all sit down and create a safety plan. I'm the person that you call and memorize my number, because the cell phones, we don't know anybody's number anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important for her to memorize, or him to memorize, local numbers that they can call, like the Houston Area Women's Center, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Family Time, all these different places that they can call that's close to their house, that they can get services,
Mm-hmm.
including your number. If they can just pick up their phone and dial your number really quick, and so many different safety apps out there that
Hmm.
can handle that and know their location and all of that. But if they don't have a phone because he or she has taken away the phone,
Mm-hmm.
then what? And so that's what those safety plans are for. And so even if you say, okay, I know you don't want to go to the Houston Area Women's Center, but when he goes to work or when she goes to work, I'll take you to the Houston Area Women's Center so you can get some help. If
Mm-hmm.
you would like, if you would like to, I will do that. But don't force somebody or try to force your opinion of what they
Yeah.
should do on them, because then they'll never reach out to you again. And they may
Mm-hmm.
not ever reach out to another person, because they feel like how you spoke to them or how you judged them, somebody else is going to do the same thing. And that's why they're quiet a lot of times, because they don't want to be judged.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's, the main reason why it's so important to um, have the awareness for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, because we have to be educated and informed and aware. Because if I'm not going to be able to provide those resources to someone, that's close to me that I love. So, I hear you saying definitely be a listening ear.
Yes.
Take yourself out of it. Remove
Yes.
yourself out of it completely. your thoughts, your opinions, what you would do, right? You're not in their situation. So support them by listening to them, right? And that helps that they can trust you and to feel, open enough to talk to you and to confide in you. So listen. And then also, safety planning. Safety planning is huge, as you're saying, but be able to provide those resources to them and help them memorize phone numbers, when that time does come or they
Mhm.
have that opportunity.
Yes, yes,
Awesome.
all of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done. But that's why I think this is just so important for us to be, educated, because I really feel like there's so many things that we talk about in the month of October, from Breast Cancer Awareness Month, just so many different things. But when it comes to domestic violence, we don't talk about that as
No,
much.
no,
Yeah.
we don't. We
Hmm.
don't. And one of the things I do want to talk about with the emotional and psychological abuse, because that does happen. And even though it's not physical, doesn't mean that it's not abuse. So we kind of talked about that. And so it's sexual abuse, economic abuse, spiritual abuse as well. But one of the things that is I see on social media is gaslighting. So
Mm.
gaslighting is a tactic that abusers use to make the victim think that she or he is crazy.
Okay.
And so you start to doubt your own thoughts and feelings based on what your abuser is saying to you. So if you saw a text message in his phone or her phone,
Mhm.
and the text message said, um, last night the sex was good. I don't know. And so you confront your abuser, and then he or she will say, that wasn't on my phone. Like,
Mhm.
you crazy. You just making this stuff up. Like, stop doing that. And after a while, you'll start questioning, like, did I see that on his phone? Well, maybe he said
Mhm.
something else. And so it makes you feel like you're crazy, because the abuser is like doubting you and making you doubt your thoughts and your feelings. And so
Mhm.
it's called gaslighting. And
Okay.
so that's like the number one tactic for
Mm.
psychological and emotional abuse, because it your brain is like, okay, well, wait a minute. Like, I know I saw what I saw,
Mhm.
but you start doubting yourself, and,
Mhm.
and it makes you think that you're crazy. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And also, strangulation is very big, um, just in general, but especially on the college campus. So people don't know that there's family violence strangulation laws in the state of Texas.
Okay.
So if any strangulation, so the students will call it choking, but it's not
Mhm.
choking, because choking is when you've eaten something and you're choking. Strangulation is when somebody is cutting off your airway. And so many people have died. The victims that have died, they have been strangled 3 or 4 times due to research. So strangulation starts out, if somebody's strangling you and cutting off your airway, they're trying to kill you.
Mhm.
So now it's against the law in the state of Texas, and it's an automatic felony, with a 3 to 10 year sentence, I believe.
Mm.
It's a third-degree felony. So it's against the law. So, but with young kids, well, not young, but teenagers, and people that are in college, they use strangulation during sex. And so
Mhm.
some people like that.
Mhm.
Hey, if that's what you like, no problem. But you need to get consent for those things, and you don't need to apply pressure to the neck, where somebody is losing conscious, because they can die.
Mhm. Wow. That's definitely good information. And I'm glad you mentioned that, as far as, kind of, getting that confused with, strangulation in a sexual manner. And
Right,
like you said, that you need to get consent first and foremost. But just also being aware of the harm and the danger that it can
yeah,
cause, and people dying from it.
right. And we can also tell when somebody's been strangled, because they'll have marks on their necks, or
Hmm.
their eyes are red, or there's red dots behind their ears. So if
Okay.
you have been strangled, it is important for you to go to the doctor, because there might be some other internal injuries that you don't know about. So just because
Mm,
it doesn't come out physically or whatever, eventually you are going to have red eyes or dots behind your ears.
hmm.
And so it's important if you are strangled that you go seek medical attention.
Right. Absolutely. And just to get yourself checked out to make sure that everything is okay because it has so many lasting
Hmm.
effects. Hmm. Absolutely. So tell us some places where we can get help. What are some resources for people to contact that may be in a domestic violence situation, or even some of the supporters, if we have friends and family members that find themselves in this situation, where can we tell them to go to get help?
Okay. So Houston is covered with
Okay.
nonprofits. If you go on the computer, I've mentioned Houston Area Women's Center because it's the most popular um, in the Houston area. So you'll see them on the news a lot. And they cover all of Houston.
Hmm.
But there's other places like Bridge Over Troubled Waters, which is located in Pasadena, Family Time, which is located in Humble, Montgomery County Women's Center, which is in the Woodlands. So it covers the Woodlands, Spring, Magnolia, all back off in there, Conroe.
Hmm.
So those are the most popular ones. But there's all you got to do is nonprofits for domestic violence and they'll come up.
Hmm.
So they have 24-hour confidential hotlines that they
Hmm.
can call. So if it's in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's the only time that you were able to get away,
Hmm.
they can call those numbers. And they have advocates that are ready to go to help them 24 hours a day.
Hmm. Hmm. Awesome. And then I know you mentioned family time. So our chapter, the Epsilon Phi chapter, actually supports family time. And we
Okay.
recently, took up a donation to, provide mothers and their children with some, necessary items that they may need. And especially we wanted to promote it during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but
Aw.
just to help them out with anything that they need. So we are
Mhm.
pretty familiar, very familiar
Oh,
with
cool.
family time. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Awesome. Okay. So before we wrap up, what can we do um, to continue to stop the silence, to break this cycle of violence? What can we do to make sure that we're talking more about this topic and shedding some more light? So how, because we want to move just beyond Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? So this is an awesome time for us to promote awareness, but how can we, continue to advocate, to support, and to, try to, make a change and, speak up more about the topic? What can we do?
Speak up.
Okay. As simple as that.
Speak
Speak
up.
up.
Speak up. And we got to stop being quiet and trying to act like it's not in our community that
Mm-hmm.
Black people don't go through these type of things. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And we need to educate our community, especially because we're African Americans, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just. I mean, we need to educate everybody, but we also need to speak up in our community. We got to stop being quiet about domestic violence, child sexual abuse, rape. We have to stop acting like it doesn't affect our community because it does. And we
Mm-hmm.
have to continue with the education part of it as well, to educate our communities and not only the African American community, but other communities about domestic violence and what it is. Sometimes people just want to focus on, how to have a healthy relationship and not really talking
Mm-hmm.
about the cycle of violence. I mean, yes, you need to know what it would take for you to be in a healthy relationship, but you also need to dig deeper on domestic violence and how it starts and the honeymoon phase and the phases of the abuse. You need to know all that information.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people probably didn't even know about strangulation and that it's against the law in the state of Texas and it's an automatic felony. And not even thinking about talking to maybe your college kids about those type of things. when they go off to school and stuff like that. And so we're just not having the conversations that we need to have with our children, but also just in general, we just want to act like it's not happening. And it is, and it's very disturbing, the things that are going on, and we're losing too many people. Like I said, in Harris County, we're number one for the past 5 years, for the most deaths, of the people, and so of victims. And so this is a serious issue, and we have to stop being quiet about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So speak up, speak up, speak up. It's
Speak
really
up.
is.
Yeah.
Speak up. It's as simple as that. And I know that sounds simple, but as we said time and time again, there is so much stigma and so much shame in our community, and we really need to work to change that, right? And
Yeah,
to, break some of those myths, challenge those myths so that we can break the cycle.
that's right.
Absolutely. So speak up, make sure that you're educated, and to continue to promote awareness. And so, how can the listeners reach you? How can the community reach you if they have questions, if they have concerns, if they need your help and support? How can they reach you?
My private practice is trauma recovery coaching. And so a lot of people are like, well, what's the difference between coaching and therapy? So the difference is really that I take you where you are right now to where you want to be in the future. I don't really process the past and like therapy does, going towards the past, and then we'll get to the present and the future. So I take you where you are. There's no treatment plans or anything like that. The survivor of child sexual abuse, rape, dating, domestic violence, and cancer are in charge of their recovery. So whatever
Mhm.
goal that you want to, accomplish in trauma recovery coaching, that's what we work on. And I am your advocate. I am walking beside you to make sure that you reach those goals. And so we have got to get help. If you have been in an abusive relationship and you just feel stuck,
Mhm.
and you just don't know where to go, and you're having problems, you're continually, being in abusive relationships is one after another, you need to get some help. So I believe my website is on the screen,
Mhm.
www just us trauma recovery coaching. All of my information is on there. I offer a free consultation just in case you have any questions. I can answer those questions in that consultation, and it's free. And then after that, if it's something that you want to do, then you would do an intake, and then we will have our first session. Now, my prices are reasonable because this is a pandemic. I know some people are not working.
Mhm.
You are, you just don't have $150 or $175 an hour to spend on therapy. So my prices are reasonable. And so I want people out there, if you know somebody, give them my website, give them my information, so they can get help. Because this is my passion, this is my purpose. I know that the Lord put me on this earth to work with survivors of relationship and sexual violence. And this is my passion. This is what I love to do. So reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, and I'll be more than happy to advocate on your behalf.
Mhm. Absolutely. So if you all have questions or concerns, and need the coaching and the support, please contact Miss Nakia Hanson. As she mentioned, this is something that she's very passionate about, and I know that firsthand. And not only is she, experienced and educated, but she's also a survivor as well of domestic violence and also cancer. And so, many, 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 just congratulations to you, for, pushing through and fighting and persevering and doing the hard work. That's such, a blessing. And
Yeah.
I know that you have your testimony, that you don't have a problem with, sharing with individuals, and that's a part of, stopping that silence and speaking out, because you never know who you're going to impact. You
That's right.
never know who's going to, hear you that day. And so your
Hmm.
testimony and your story is not just for you, right? It's
Right.
for so many other people, to bless them and to ultimately save a life.
That's
And
right.
so we just thank you, for your transparency, your
Thank
honesty,
you.
the work that you do, and being a survivor. And like you mentioned, yes, we advocate and we spread awareness for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as well as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but also just to honor those that have been survivors, because it's not an easy task.
Right.
It's not an easy thing to do.
Hmm. Very much so. Very much so. So
So,
thank you so
yeah.
much for having me. This
Of
is great.
course. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And on behalf of our chapter, the Epsilon Phi chapter, our president, Dr. Valencia Dutton Hall, we just thank you. We thank you. We thank you. This is a conversation that needs to be had.
Hmm.
We learned a lot of great information. I know that I've learned so much, and I know that our viewers have learned a lot. And I'm just glad that we could, you know, have this time to talk and really, like you said, to speak up and to break this silence so that we can stop the violence.
Yes. And thank you for even deciding to have this, because we do need to speak up and start having more conversations and honest
Mhm.
conversations about domestic violence.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much once
Welcome.
again.
You're
Enjoyed you.
welcome.
All right.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for listening in. Once again, domestic violence is such a very important issue that we don't talk about enough. And so we thank you for listening in. And I hope that you learned something new. I hope that something stuck with you, maybe even a new perspective, and you've learned some ways to, be open to talk more about domestic violence and to, be that support, to become educated, to promote awareness, and most importantly, to speak up. Domestic violence affects each and every one of us in one way or another. And so nobody is exempt from domestic violence. It does not discriminate. And so we're all in this fight together. So continue to spread awareness and stop the silence and end the violence. Thank you so much once again on behalf of Iota Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated, Epsilon Phi Chapter. Take care.